Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. Robert Eugene Brashers poses with his family in Alabama, hiding a dark past. After his death, DNA identified him as a serial killer responsible for at least 7 brutal murders, including the 1991 yogurt shop massacre in Texas. Edward Llewellyn poses beside the largest sea bass ever recorded, caught in 1903, weighing an astonishing 425 pounds. The catch took place in California and remained a world record for decades, becoming a milestone in the history of sport fishing. On Independence Day in 1983, children gathered in a park to compete in a fun watermelon eating contest. Amid laughter and falling pieces, the event was part of the 4th of July celebrations, symbolizing the lighthearted and joyful spirit of summer festivities. A mother walks with her children after choosing books from the Cincinnati Bookmobile in 1940. The service brought free reading to rural areas of the United States, connecting families to education and encouraging a love of reading. After World War II, a German civilian was forced to watch documentaries showing the horrors of concentration camps. When she laughed during the screening, a British soldier harshly reprimanded her and made her watch the film again. In this rare 1985 photo, Princess Diana takes part in a shooting exercise at a British military range under the guidance of a police instructor. The training was part of an official visit meant to better understand the security team's daily routines. Donald Trump appears relaxed at a business reception in Moscow, surrounded by Russian businessmen and glasses of wine. The 1996 photo shows a little-remembered moment from his commercial ventures in the country, decades before he became president. In 1950s France, a man curiously observes a bottle of Coca-Cola before tasting it for the first time. The American drink arrived in the country as a symbol of U.S. cultural influence after the war, arousing both fascination and suspicion among Europeans. Millionaire Benjamin Guggenheim, a passenger aboard the Titanic, refused a seat in a lifeboat to give his place to women. He dressed in his best suit and reportedly said, "Tell my family I played the game straight to the end." He died in the 1912 sinking. Peggy Seal Harris spent decades without knowing the fate of her husband, Pilot Billy, shot down over Levantes, France, in 1944. Only in 2005 did she discover that the town had honored him since the war, keeping his memory alive. 2 women walk smiling through the streets of Fort Worth, Texas, while a man whistles in the background in 1952. After the war, women's fashion became more relaxed, and wearing shorts in public was beginning to gain social acceptance. British Dr. John Bodkin Adams, accused of being a serial killer, reads the newspaper announcing his acquittal of murder charges. Between 1946 and 1956, 163 of his patients died in comas, and 132 of them left inheritances to the doctor. 2 waist gunners aboard a B-17 bomber capture a rare moment of relaxation amid chaos. At 25,000 feet, the photograph reveals the courage and humanity of those who lived constantly between duty and fear. Grand Duchess Anastasia Nikolaevna of Russia makes faces to cheer up her sister Olga, who appears sick in bed behind her. The scene reveals a rare moment of humor and humanity within the rigid imperial family shortly before the Russian Revolution. In South Carolina in 1912, a family smiles in front of their simple home, something rare in formal portraits of the time. While studio photos kept serious expressions, everyday records like this revealed authentic moments of affection and warmth. A couple enjoys a day at the beach with a huge valve radio, a symbol of early 20th century technological progress. The device ran on batteries and allowed outdoor listening long before compact radios and modern players existed. A woman is seen plugging her electric car into a socket inside her garage in 1912. Electric vehicles were already a reality in the early 20th century, especially among urban families who appreciated their practicality and quiet operation. Vietnamese fighters walk across an improvised bridge over the swamp, their faces covered with white cloth to conceal their identities. This tactic was common among Viet Cong members during secret meetings in the jungles of the Mekong Delta during the Vietnam War. Princess Diana smiles shyly from inside the carriage on her wedding day to Prince Charles. It was July 29, 1981, and the world watched what seemed like a modern fairy tale, one that would later reveal itself as one of the saddest stories in British royalty. A farmer walks with his children through a dust storm in Cimarron County, Oklahoma, in 1936. The event occurred during the Dust Bowl, when extreme droughts and poor farming practices devastated crops and forced thousands of families to migrate. A baker offers fresh bread directly from a handcart on the streets in 1925. Street vending was common, allowing basic goods such as bread, milk, and fruit to reach homes daily before the rise of modern supermarkets. 4 women pose with rifles beside a young boy at a campsite deep in the forest in 1890. Hunting and camping were common family activities among pioneers who had to balance survival and leisure in the still wild frontier regions. In a small Welsh town, a woman washes her husband after a day's work in the coal mines in 1931. Houses had no bathrooms, and miners returned home covered in soot. This routine was common among working families, symbolizing the harsh industrial life of early 20th century Britain. A stunned American soldier walks among wounded bodies on Omaha Beach after surviving the hell of D-Day. The Normandy invasion marked the beginning of the end of Nazi domination in Europe and cost thousands of lives in the first hours of battle. Among New York skyscrapers, a couple walks elegantly down the sidewalk, wearing the typical clothes of the high society of the 1920s. The photograph portrays the height of the Jazz Age, when fashion and urban style reflected prosperity and modernity. During World War II, the WASP aviators took on vital duties. They flew planes, towed targets, and tested aircraft in Texas. They freed men for combat and paved the way for women to permanently earn their place in military aviation. Crowds gathered in the streets of Moscow to hear the radio announce that Germany had invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. The heavy silence on the faces in the crowd marked the beginning of a war that would change the destiny of millions. In the snowy mountains of New South Wales in 1942, 3 men jumped together while skiing, defying the intense cold of the Australian winter. The sport was gaining popularity in the region, serving as both leisure and physical training during the war years. Inside the tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered in 1922 in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologists found richly detailed figures like these, representing servants and guardians meant to accompany the pharaoh in the afterlife. Valerie Banks stands alone in an empty classroom on the first day after the official end of racial segregation in Boston schools. Federal courts had mandated busing to integrate black and white students. She was the only one to attend geography class that day. Sisters Florence and Susie Fryer-Muth appear after being arrested for producing illegal alcohol during Prohibition. They operated a small homemade still, symbolizing popular resistance to the federal government's alcohol ban. Girls pose on a car parked by the roadside in Santa Monica, California, enjoying the summer sun of 1936. During the Great Depression, the area became a popular refuge for young people, marking the start of California's coastal lifestyle. A delivery man smiles while carrying a large block of ice on his shoulder during his shift in the 1930s. Before electric refrigerators, ice was delivered daily to homes to preserve food, making these workers essential in American cities. At only 7 years old, Terence Tao takes a math test among high school teenagers at Blackwood High School in Adelaide, Australia. The prodigy showed early genius and would later become one of the brightest mathematicians on the planet. Babe Ruth makes his final public appearance at Yankee Stadium in 1948 before a crowd honoring him as he retired his legendary number 3 jersey. 2 months later, he would die. The image, taken by Nathaniel Fine, became an icon in baseball history. In 1948 in Chicago, a desperate mother placed a sign in front of her house offering her 4 children for sale. The extreme poverty of the post-war period drove many American families to the limit, and this image became a cruel symbol of misery and despair. A traveling healer went from farm to farm with his horse-drawn wagon, selling homemade medicines and tonics around 1900. Known as road doctors, these merchants were often the only source of treatment in many rural areas. At 89 years old, Winston Churchill bids farewell to the House of Commons after 6 decades in politics. The former British Prime Minister ended his career on July 27, 1964, amid applause honoring an entire era of leadership. The announcement of the not guilty verdict for O.J. Simpson in 1995 divided America and sparked explosive reactions across the country. At Augustana College, students crowded around the TV, expressing shock, relief, and disbelief at one of the most controversial trials in history. East German guards stare across the wall as crowds celebrate the end of an era on the other side. On November 11, 1989, just 2 days after the fall of the Berlin Wall, 28 years of separation disappeared before their eyes. A British aircraft carrier sails under the Atlantic sun, filled with sailors relaxing on deck, surrounded by Harrier jets and the endless blue sea. Aboard HMS Hermes, the crew headed toward the Falkland Islands, days before the conflict with Argentina erupted. Former German SS officer Walter Kutschmann lived for years in hiding in Argentina after commanding massacres of Jews and Polish teachers in Galicia during World War II. Exposed in 1975, he died before being extradited to West Germany. An Absaroki warrior watches the horizon from horseback on the Western Plains in 1908. The Absaroki people, also known as the Crow, were renowned for their riding skills and for maintaining traditions that symbolized strength, honor, and spiritual connection with nature. An FBI agent wearing only underwear walks across an airport runway in 1972 to deliver $1 million in ransom to a Delta Airlines hijacker. The criminal had threatened to blow up the plane if his demands were not met. A sergeant points to the bullet hole in the official car of British Lieutenant Lord French after the December 1919 ambush. The attack, planned by the IRA in Ireland, failed, but marked the beginning of a series of offensives against British rule. The commander peers through the sight of an M48 Patton tank amid the stifling heat of the Vietnamese jungle. The tension is visible in his eyes, reflecting the weight of every decision in the 1967 war, a conflict with no clear winners. 28 students pose with their teacher in front of a small wooden schoolhouse in Missouri in 1939. One-room schools were common in rural areas where children of different ages learned together under a single educator's guidance. Fidel Castro visits the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. during his trip to the United States in 1959, shortly after leading the Cuban Revolution. The visit symbolized a brief moment of diplomacy before relations between the two nations collapsed. In 1968, Andy Warhol barely survived after being shot by a radical feminist. The bullet ricocheted inside his body, hitting his stomach, liver, spleen, esophagus, and lungs. Gravely injured, Warhol was clinically dead for several minutes before being revived. At 14, Robert McGee survived being scalped by Kiowa warriors during the Walnut Creek Massacre. The brutal attack left scars he carried for life. Decades later, McGee exhibited himself in circuses, becoming an attraction of the Old West. In 1895, women went to the beach wearing heavy dresses, boots, and hats that covered almost the entire body, as exposing skin was considered indecent. 20 years later, in 1915, swimsuits shortened and became lighter, following fashion trends and women's growing quest for freedom in the pre-war era. The CEO of the largest mail-order company in the United States is forcibly removed from his office by the National Guard after refusing to negotiate with workers during World War II. The company was placed under military control following the standoff with the government. A couple takes a coffee break beside their handmade trailer, built in 1918. Mounted on a car, the vehicle provided sleeping and cooking space, representing one of the first forms of motorized camping and the beginning of road travel culture. In a shelter for children traumatized by war, Teresa Adwentowska of Warsaw expressed her pain by drawing what she called home on a blackboard. For decades, her identity remained a mystery until she was revealed to be the girl forever marked by terror. A doctor visits a family to examine a sick boy in 1940. At the time, rural care was provided by traveling physicians who covered long distances, bringing basic medical attention to isolated regions with no hospitals. A young boy works in a glass factory in 1890, a time when child labor was common in American industries. Children were hired for low wages and faced long hours under dangerous conditions. European leaders appear exhausted during a conference in Germany about World War I reparations. The photo was secretly taken by Eric Salomon, who hid his camera to capture spontaneous moments of political power. A U.S. Army priest wears a camouflage cassock during the Vietnam War in 1968. Surrounded by exhausted and wounded soldiers, he offered spiritual comfort and prayers before battles, becoming a figure of courage and humanity in the devastated jungle. In Istanbul, a statue was erected in honor of Tumbili, the street cat who became a city symbol for his relaxed way of watching life. The feline used to lie against the curb, calmly observing the daily routine of passers-by who crossed his path. A suffragette is violently detained by British police in 1914 during a protest in London. These women faced imprisonment, beatings, and even hunger strikes to win the right to vote, a milestone finally achieved in 1918. Thousands of activists filled the streets of New York carrying a rainbow banner over half a mile long to celebrate 25 years since the Stonewall riots. The monumental gesture symbolized the struggle and pride of the LGBTQ+ community. On a busy New York street, shoeshine boys take a lunch break beside a hot dog cart in 1947. After World War II, many young people worked on the sidewalks to help support their families. In the 1980s, East Berlin perfectly reflected the socialist urban ideal: standardized residential blocks, wide avenues, and functionalist architecture. This cold and geometric landscape contrasted sharply with the dynamism and brightness of West Berlin. Holding a blowtorch, a young woman worker cuts the hatch of a Gatto-class submarine at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. The photo, originally in color, was taken for Life magazine in October 1943. A housewife poses beside a week's worth of groceries bought for only $12.50 in 1947. The amount was enough to feed a family of 4, offering a vivid portrait of post-war America when money could still sustain the American dream. Vladimir Putin lays a wreath at Ground Zero in New York in 2001, just 2 months after the September 11th attacks. The visit marked a rare gesture of solidarity between Russia and the United States, symbolizing their brief alliance against terrorism. Engineer and former Air Force member Lonnie Johnson invented the Super Soaker in the late 1980s, turning a simple water gun into a worldwide phenomenon. In 2013, he received nearly $73 million from Hasbro in unpaid royalties. Winston Churchill visits the ruins of Hitler's bunker in Berlin and sits on the debris of a chair found among the rubble in 1945. The gesture symbolized the Allied victory over the Nazi regime and the end of World War II in Europe. On the streets of Seattle, two teenage runaways struggle to survive away from home. Rat 16 and Mike, 17, display a Colt 45 used to protect themselves from assaults and kidnappings. The 1980s marked a lost generation trapped between drugs, neglect, and constant fear. Cowboys gather around a chuck wagon, the mobile kitchen used on long cattle drives across the Old West in the late 1800s. The wagon carried food supplies, pots, and coffee, serving as the meeting point for cowhands after long hours of work. King Abdullah II of Jordan, then a prince and army officer, made a guest appearance on the television series Star Trek in 1999, fulfilling his dream of acting in his favorite show. His brief silent scene was filmed during a diplomatic visit to the United States. A small Japanese train station remained open for years, solely to serve a single student who boarded daily in the freezing weather to reach school. The government kept it running until her graduation, closing it shortly afterward. A group of Russian bikers rides through Moscow's underground tunnels in 1990, drinking beer as they race beneath the city. Young people explored their newly won freedom following the collapse of the Soviet regime. Ronald Reagan watches with amusement as two people dressed as a horse enter his White House office. The 1989 scene took place during a farewell visit organized by his staff and friends, honoring his well-known love for horses. Known as the Romeo and Juliet of Sarajevo, Boško Brkić, 24, and Admira Izmić, 25, were shot by snipers while trying to cross the Vrbanja Bridge during the Bosnian War in 1993. The couple, he a Serb and she a Bosnian Muslim, died in each other's arms. Workers celebrate the end of Prohibition by raising boxes of beer on a truck ready for distribution. The repeal marked the reopening of breweries and bars nationwide, ending 13 years of restrictions on alcohol consumption. Wearing torn clothes and an uneasy expression, Charles Manson is photographed after his arrest for the Tate LaBianca murders in 1969. Leader of a cult that shocked the world, he manipulated young followers into committing brutal crimes in Los Angeles. In this photograph taken from a different angle, the pyramids of Giza appear to rise directly from the urban chaos of modern Cairo, revealing the striking contrast between the grandeur of ancient Egypt and 20th century daily life. A fisherman patiently repairs his net before returning to the sea. The scene, recorded in 1912, shows a common custom in coastal villages of northern Europe, where manual preparation of equipment was an essential part of daily life. Two young women ride in a Lawson motorized tricycle, one of the first combustion vehicles in history. Built in 1902, the model combined bicycle and automobile elements, marking the beginning of the motorized personal transport era. Amid the fog covering Hong Kong's canals in the 1950s, small boats navigate between buildings filled with vertical neon signs. The scene portrays the contrast between traditional life on the boats and the rapid urban growth transforming the city after the war. During a golf game in 1995, Bill Clinton received news of the assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. The attack occurred after a peace rally in Tel Aviv. The murder deeply shook the peace process in the Middle East. In Mountain Park, Alberta, a group spends Sunday playing baseball surrounded by snow-covered peaks. The scene shows men, women, and children participating in the game, a common custom in small Canadian communities that united families through outdoor recreation. 3 women displayed trophies after winning the perfect posture contest at a chiropractor's convention. Behind them, X-rays show their spines, which were used as part of the evaluation. Held in 1956, the event promoted healthy body habits and the benefits of chiropractic care. A Russian soldier observes Constantinople after a long and bloody campaign in the 11th Russo-Turkish War. In 1878, the Tsar's armies reached the gates of the Ottoman capital, imposing a victory that shifted the balance of power and weakened the Ottoman Empire forever. Jane Goodall extends her hand to the young chimpanzee, Flint in Tanzania, in a gesture that changed primatology forever. Her close coexistence with the group revolutionized the understanding of animal behavior, proving that chimpanzees use tools and feel complex emotions. The Billy Barker Inn, located in Quesnel, British Columbia, was inaugurated in 1962 and became an important stop for travelers and workers in the region. Named after the gold miner Billy Barker, the hotel symbolized local growth after the gold rush in Canada's interior. A child wearing a white hood stands before a group of Ku Klux Klan members in Macon, Georgia, in 1946. The moment shows the cycle of hatred passed between generations, when racism was taught as heritage and fanaticism was disguised as family tradition. Workers assemble motorcycles inside Harley-Davidson's original factory in 1924 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Each part was adjusted by hand, and the environment reflected the early days of mass production that would make the brand a global icon of motorcycle culture. The streets of Chicago in the early 20th century show a city in full industrial transformation. Carriages and automobiles share space under the elevated train tracks, symbolizing the urban progress that made the metropolis one of America's major economic centers. Female workers at the Hershey factory manually packed chocolate bars before production lines became automated. Each bar was wrapped individually, demonstrating the precision and care required. Hershey was already one of the largest chocolate manufacturers in the world at that time. A young Romanian holds his PSL rifle tightly while aiming at regime forces. It was December 1989, and Bucharest burned with fury and hope. The Romanian Revolution marked the bloody end of the communist era and the beginning of long-awaited freedom. On a bizarre mission between mysticism and science, a team of Nazi archaeologists poses with Tibetan monks during an expedition. Led by Ernst Schaefer, they sought supposed origins of the Aryan race in an effort to legitimize the racial ideologies of the Third Reich. Moments before Marcus Sargent fired 6 blank shots, Queen Elizabeth II paraded during Trooping the Color in 1981. Even after the attack, she kept control of her horse and continued the ceremony. The assailant was sentenced to 5 years in prison for treason. A photographer risks his life suspended by a crane to capture panoramic images of London's busy streets in 1929. The technique, daring for its time, allowed for unprecedented city views, long before helicopters and drones became common in aerial photography. 3 female motorcycle officers patrol the streets of Los Angeles, displaying a sign that reads, "Go slow and see our city, go fast and see our jail." The 1927 photograph captures the beginning of women's participation in U.S. police forces. The lunar module Orion from the Apollo 16 mission landed on the Moon's surface in 1972. Under the command of astronaut John W. Young, The crew conducted experiments and sample collections using the lunar rover beside the module in one of the longest missions of the Apollo program. Yuri Yudin hugs Lyudmila Dubinina as Igor Dyatlov looks on, unaware he would be the last to see them alive. Days later, all 9 hikers would die mysteriously in the Urals in what became known as the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of the greatest enigmas of the 20th century. During the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, citizens of Budapest toppled one of Joseph Stalin's massive statues, a symbol of Soviet domination. Here we see the bronze head lying in the street after the act, one of the most striking moments of popular resistance against communist rule. With help from friends, a teenager balances on a wall just to hand flowers to Princess Diana. The simple 1989 gesture shows the irresistible charisma of the people's princess, who returned the gift with the smile that made her one of the most beloved faces in the world. With a face marked by pain, a young German woman walks alone along a deserted road in Czechoslovakia. Beaten after the war's end, she became a symbol of the humiliation suffered by thousands of German refugees expelled from Europe between May and July 1945. Elegant Parisians look over the Seine River beneath the newly built Eiffel Tower, a symbol of progress and the Belle Époque. Around 1900, Paris lived its golden age. Electric trams, crowded cafes, and the World's Fair announcing the future amid the city's classical beauty. During the U.S. intervention in Panama, American soldiers interact with local women amid Operation Just Cause. Officially launched to overthrow Manuel Noriega, the mission exposed political and civilian tensions and was ironically nicknamed Just Because by soldiers. Pilot David McCampbell, the U.S. Navy's top ace of World War II, poses with his F-6F Hellcat after shooting down 9 planes in a single day at the Battle of Leyte Gulf in 1944. By the end of the war, he had 34 victories and became a legend of the Pacific skies. In this 1910 photo, we see a farmer with his dog in a field in Port Alberni, British Columbia, Canada. At that time, the region stood out for agriculture and fruit growing, especially strawberries, which formed the basis of the local economy in the early 20th century. Buddy Bolden, considered the creator of jazz, appears at the center of this rare photograph taken around 1905 with his band in New Orleans. He influenced generations of musicians, but at age 30, he was institutionalized for schizophrenia, and no recordings of his music survived. The Saturn SA-8 mission marked the launch of Pegasus 2, one of the satellites created to study the impact of micrometeorites on spacecraft. Carried out in 1965, the operation placed 3 satellites in low Earth orbit, contributing to advances in safety for future space missions. Astronaut Alan L. Bean performed one of the last spacewalks of the Skylab program in 1973. As commander of the second crew, he carried out external maintenance, while his colleague Owen K. Garriott recorded the scene, whose reflection can be seen in Bean's helmet. Haskins and Elliott Bicycles was a popular store that rented bicycles for $2.50 per week and carried out repairs and sharpening. The place drew attention for also offering key and safe services, combining different trades in one address.